because the disco was happening, you know, and no matter what, you couldn't get away from it, and you couldn't ignore it.
Do the hustle. Do the hustle.
There was a threat to everything that we did. All the kids that used to come out and see us were suddenly grown up a little bit. And now they were kind of getting jobs, and they were going on dates, and where were they going? They were going to discos to dance.
I think in the 70s there was a mistaken sense that everything was okay, everything was groovy and nifty. Things like Vietnam and Watergate were very disillusioning, and it was much easier to just kind of shuffle them aside and be goofy and have big hair and leisure suits and have fun.
The 60s, having been over, people assumed there was no reason that the party had to be over. And they were right, of course. I mean, sure, by all means go on having a good time. We know now you're not going to change the government because they have more tape recorders than you do.
People were ready to put down the pickets, and they were ready to just be people and to have a sense of their humanness, I think.
It was kind of the 60s hedonism without any of the political consciousness.
Nobody knew about anything serious or tragic. It was just party, party, party.
We wrote about happy stuff, not because life around us was happy, but because we chose to sort of pretend like life was happy. I grew up in very political times, and then I realized that music provided me a place where I could go and escape from the realities of my normal life. It was the times that sort of dictated the style of the music.
Must put an end to the stress and strife. I think I want to live the sporty life. Good time.
Those were happy years. Disco was really happy years. And it brought the people out, you know. Those were happy years.
I just want to satisfy your balls.
Extended play dance music. What's disco? Extended play dance music. James Brown began making that transition. If you ever saw James Brown live, the songs just went on forever. What disco did was take the concept of constant musicality, extended vamps, and extend it in another context. What we know as disco, it's a lot of James Brown rhythms with more florid landscapes on top of them.
I wake up in a cold sweat.
The roots of disco basically come from rhythm, R&B music. I think it comes from symphony. It's kind of street and it's ethnic. It's an incredible marriage.
Before the disco explosion, the kind of music that you would hear would be Gamble and Huff related songs from Philly International, which eventually became the Philly Sound.
Some people got to have it. Hey, hey, hey. Some people really need it.
Gamble and Huff found in the early 70s songs that not only had a good beat and a strong singer, but an idea that resonated with people.
Cash money, dollar bills,
A lot of people after the big turbulence of the 60s were thinking, what about me? These were songs about ambition and betrayal that really meant a lot to people in the 70s.
people will steal from their mother. People will rob their own brother.
So you had the drive of the beat, you had a real passionate gospel-y vocalist, and you had this big cushion of orchestra all around it. And it was a winning formula for a while in the early 70s.
Trying to label our music as being disco or soul or R&B or anything. We were just recording and doing what we felt. It was a big hit in the discos because it was dance music.
Disco was really, you know, a club thing. It was all about people dancing. It was really third world, kind of the, you know, you had black, the Spanish, you had all the people that were in the clubs, and it was free, it was fun.
Turn the beat around. Love to hear percussion. Turn it upside down. Love to hear percussion. Love to hear it blow on your just down pretty.
There were no color boundaries with any of these songs. You can have an Anglo artist singing very soulfully and when it would work, and you can have a Latino artist or an African American artist. It was just music that you can dance to.
Turn the beat around. Turn it around. Love to hear percussion.
Black and white was into disco. It brought people together.
Disco clearly was associated with disenfranchised groups, blacks or gays. I heard it in gay bars.
There was a gay aesthetic that was at work in La Belle. There were actual personas on stage, a kind of flamboyance. And to see the beginnings of what we came to be as the disco world and the sort of melding of blacks, Latinos, and gays.
Disco was the modern explosion of the gay rights movement, you know. You could have seen it as a party and as a frivolous thing, but it was also the idea that gay people and their culture could go above ground.
The gay community in the U.S. was the first basically to latch on to the disco phenomenon, and it has come up through those roots.
The gays were starting to come out of the closet. They had the clubs and this music was really theirs. And there was a lot more percussive stuff happening, and dancing became really a form of self-expression.
Every man has a place. In his heart there's a space. And the world can't erase his fantasies. Take a ride in the sky on a ship, fantasize. All your dreams will come true right away.
The gay clubs were the one place that the guys and gals could feel safe, come in and dance. You know, they had to have a place where they could just really be themselves.
Those guys back in the 70s, you know what they used to do? They used to like spend all night getting ready, and then like by the time they were ready, they'd be like so loaded and so drunk that the clubs would be closed and they had nowhere to go.
I want to get in here. I drove an hour and a half. I got an invitation. I want to be in the hottest spot in town.
I have been here many a nights and I talk to people from all over the world, and their ultimate dream is to get in 54.
Studio 54 was the ultimate nightclub. It just was so gargantuan, glitzy, exciting. Just getting in constituted the excitement of a whole evening. In fact, just standing outside for me was excitement enough.
There was wasn't any other club in the world like it at the time. It was definitely the place where you saw everybody, you could do everything.
All that pressure got you down. Has your head spinning all around. Feel the rhythm, chant the rhyme. Come on along and have a real good time.
The first time we went to Studio 54, even though we were invited as Grace Jones's personal guest, it was the very first time we came into contact with the Velvet Rope.
Just come on down to the 50th floor. Find a spot out on the floor.
You need a concentration of population to really make a club go. Eventually, discos were out to the suburbs because everybody wants to meet and get together and dance and have a good time, but the initial impetus was really cities, was New York, was Los Angeles.
It's 3 in the morning in Manhattan, and still at Studio 54, people crowd the doors hoping to get in. But first, they have to do something even harder than finding a place to park here, and that's to win the approval of the owner, 28-year-old Steve Rubel.
Oh, you're not shaved? There's no way in a million years you're gonna get in. It doesn't matter if you're not shaved. Listen, just go home.
Rubel was a master. Night after night, he knew how many straights he wanted, how many gays he wanted, how many flamboyant people he wanted. He just wanted to mix it. Every night there'd be something there that would be interesting and unusual.
I want to get in. I'd like to see the owner.
It was just basically, you know, you meet someone, you got 5 seconds to make a reaction. That person either hits you right or doesn't hit you right. On any given moment, any other person running that door might make different selections. The process was replete with mistakes and inconsistencies. It was obnoxious, but it was all done just because we were trying to do a great party.
As long as they're fun, we don't care what they are. They could be working around the corner at the McDonald's, or they could be worth millions. I mean, it doesn't. That has no effect. It's not. Nothing is financial in here.
Let's show the world we can dance. Bad enough to strut our stuff.
It seemed like the harder it became to get in the club, the more people wanted to go there.
So people started coming in ways that they thought no one else was going to come, so that they would be sure to get in. It was a happening.
Then what it created inside was this opportunity for people to sort of live out their fantasies. Anything that they probably couldn't do on the other side of the rope, and here they felt somehow protected.
It's really the nightclub of the future. It's totally integrated, both sexually and ethnically. Anything goes. Boys and boys, girls and girls, girls and boys, mules and fire hydrants.
Not only is it fun to dance, it's fun to look at, other people. You walk around and you see all kind of things. It's like a show. The whole thing, the props coming down and you see all the different fashions and people. It's really nice. It's where you come when you want to escape. It's really escapism.
That's what I try to make it be, too, is escapism. In other words, people who have whatever hassles they have all day, they come here and they can forget about them.
Studio 54 was dabbling in this idea that everybody's a star. It was the ultimate democracy of celebrity. Everybody was equal, but everybody who got in was equal. Once you got in, that instantly made you a VIP.
I think at Studio 54 you'd see a lot of really interesting people, really curious people, like Truman Capote and Andy would be there, and somehow or other I think that the atmosphere was anonymous enough that they would, feel comfortable there. And it was interesting enough sexually that they didn't feel like inhibited or, they could relax.
It was a very pansexual scene. Bisexuality was very cool because it was the height of the one-night stand era. And it didn't seem to matter if you slept with a man, a woman, or whatever. It was a very free-for-all feeling of just sexual abandon. It was just libido gone haywire.
That was a time when you could put on your polyester, go and hang out and pick somebody up. If she could move on the dance floor, maybe she can move in bed.
There was a real feeling of sexual liberation at the time, and it's taken on these awful, overtones and undertones since, but at the time, not at all. It was felt that it was part of anyone's healthy life.
We want to goof around and have fun and enjoy ourselves, and pinch bottoms and get drunk. And for the men, pick up girls. Okay, the truth, I'm lonely.
Most people were going there, and it was just a place for fast sex. I mean, whether they wanted to disguise it as a dance hall or whatever, it was a pickup joint.
People were able to dance and touch each other, dance and do drugs together, and they all became part of one big party. That probably led to lots of things that happened right on the dance floor, up in the balcony, or on the way home.
The disco era had a new drug, cocaine.
Disco dust. You don't know what disco dust is? Excuse me. It's coke, babe. No, don't you think? Disco, coke?
The whole drug thing was glamorized. At the high point of the night, this big descending quarter moon came down with a big Coke spoon. Not only wasn't it hidden or discouraged, it was all made to be part of the fun and the excitement of the frivolous, hedonistic 70s.
I think the overuse of drugs got overplayed. Drug use was no more than any other place, in any other public facility, anywhere. But because we had things that were meant to give people a little chuckle, like the moon and the spoon, it got played up and it got really all distorted.
This is when cocaine was looked at as a recreational drug, let's face it. People weren't worried about getting addicted, and they weren't going to Betty Ford, and so I mean, for better or worse, it was a really joyous time.
Had disco music not found me the way that it did, I probably would have wound up kind of being more of a rock and roll singer, which would have been difficult, because there are not many black female rock and roll singers.
Donna Summer was the queen of disco. Neil Bogart at Casablanca had a foresight. He told me, I've got this girl in Germany, gonna be a star. How he knew, I don't know.
Donna Summer was broken big in the United States by Neil Bogart. It took a visionary and a promotion maniac like Bogart to break an artist like Donna Summer.
We found Donna in Munich, and in '75 we recorded Love to Love You Baby, which was a real disco song, and in early '76 became #1 in the States and then #1 worldwide, and that was the beginning of my involvement with disco.
I thought that I was laying the foundation for someone else to actually record the song, and a lot of places I didn't have words, so I sang oohs and ahs originally. Neil Bogart heard the actual track and he liked it, called back and said, listen, where's the artist and can you lengthen this thing?
Some journalists started to count how often she moaned, and there was an article, I think in Time or Newsweek, talking about it.
A lot of the stations in England and different places banned the record at the time, and when they banned the record, it of course made people go out and say, well, why are they restricting this? And they went out and bought it more and more and more, and then it became an even bigger hit.
I remember Brian Eno running into my... He's going to hate me for this. Running into my room with a single in his hand, he said, I've heard the future.
I said, oh, well, you better put it on then. And it was Giorgio Moroder's recording of Donna Summer, I Feel Love. And I said, are you serious? And he said, yes, listen, that Teutonic drumming, that black voice, this is fantastic.
One of the criticisms which disco had was that there were no really acts behind the product. And somehow it was right, with the exception, of course, Donna Summer. She was an act, she was the singer. Gloria Gaynor was the singer. But then a lot of times the producer was the star.
Disco records were beautifully produced in most cases. People might be surprised to hear me say this, but you go back and listen to those Bee Gees records, and both as pop music and if you want to call it disco or dance music, they were superbly produced.
They made the marriage of black and white. They put it right in the middle and said, hey, we're funky, we're doing it. And it worked.
I mean, there was Donna Summer and Casey and the Sunshine Band and people like that were making these like kind of fun dance records.
That's the way, I like it. That's the way, I like it. That's the way, I like it. That's the way,
You know, so that was the disco that was starting before Fever came out.
There was a guy in New York, Nick Cohen, who did an article called Tribal Rights of a Saturday Night, which our manager, Robert Stigwood, saw, thought it was a great idea to do something about kids dancing on a Saturday night. He called us up and said, would we write the soundtrack to it? We said we were writing a new studio album. We have, however, got 5 songs finished. And he took those without even seeing the movie.
The thing that used to make me the maddest about disco was the fact that secretly I thought Saturday Night Fever was one of the best albums ever made. Those guys were such great songwriters. I wish they would have been horrible, because then I could have really hated them, but I really liked the Bee Gees. Every time I would come on, if I were alone in the car, I'd go, yeah, I like that, that's all right, you know.
To me, I thought their music was great. It's about dance, it's about joy, it's about move your body and feel it. It's about fun.
Saturday Night Fever was a great character study. You really see where this guy is coming from. And you could see that his hopes and dreams were built on what he does, which is just getting dressed up and going out and hanging out and dancing.
Saturday Night Fever had an average guy, Tony Manero, could have been me or you. It was a guy from Brooklyn, and it just gave you the idea that he could be the king of the disco, and that really flavored the whole disco phenomenon with this democratic idea that anybody could go in and take over that dance floor.
John Travolta's performance in that movie is just brilliant. The way he, first of all, the way he showed that it was possible for a white man to be a virtuoso of dance in the way that had always been accepted in black culture. He put choreography and graceful moves into the mainstream.
Saturday Night Fever really catapulted everything to the next level. It was more of a happening than a movie. I mean, it just was people walking around like John Travolta going like this. I mean, we have the cliche lives on. I mean, you know, as soon as they play certain songs, everybody gets on the floor and starts doing this. That's a pretty powerful image if you think of it.
It had the ultimate disco message, if you will. It was based on what you did, not who you were.
We had entered a zone that we had no knowledge about and no experience in. And that is to be just selling records like there's no tomorrow. I mean, there was...
for weeks and weeks.
For weeks at a
million
time.
a week.
So it was quite a shock to us.
When Saturday Night Fever hit, disco, for the most part, was already peaking at the time. And what that really did was just create an awareness, I guess, to Middle America more so than in New York.
It's Friday night at an Arthur Murray dance studio. 7 lessons for $75, 1 hour a week. As the ads say, anyone can disco. Kids do it. Roller skaters do it. People in Peking do it.
Since the advent of Saturday Night Fever and making the mass market aware of disco, now the sales are going to substantially increase, from radio stations picking up on disco records, disco formats sweeping the country.
Have no fear, Bacchus here. Bacchus my name and disco's my game. We'll boogie down until 10 o'clock tonight with the best disco sounds of the nation.
Top 40 stations were blasting disco, and there was a period after Saturday Night Fever where the Bee Gees and that sound seemed to be engulfing and marginalizing rock and roll. And that created a certain amount of defensiveness with some of the rock artists.
I like a lot of disco music, but I detest most of it.
In 1978, disco record sales were over $50 million, about 15% of the record market, and reportedly double the 1977 figure. The industry estimates it's an $8 billion a year business, and that's just for what discos charge for admission, food, and drinks.
There was a lot of people who actually weren't disco acts, thought that they'd better make a disco record because it was so universal at that point that to not make a disco record was a mistake. So everybody was making disco records.
I was really surprised when Rod Stewart did his first disco song, which was Do You Think I'm Sexy? And I think he did a great job with this one. But that was a sign, I thought, that disco is now, at least in the minds of the rockers, too.
Every time I heard it, I felt like saying, are you serious?
Everybody bought those records. Whereas right now, it would be very difficult to find a black person that buys Rod Stewart records. You just don't roll down the street and say, yo, you know, I mean, I can't wait to get that new Rod Stewart record. You know, it just doesn't work like that.
You know, I think that Rod Stewart did a good job of assimilating and Do You Think I'm Sexy, the whole genre, and saying, hey man, I'm a rock guy, but I like to dance. It's cool. I like to dance. It's okay.
The first day we walked into Atlantic Records with our hit record, they asked us if we wanted to produce, you know, Bette Midler, the Stones, because they wanted dance records. Disco and dance music definitely changed everything.
What's the matter, man? Why we're coming around
around 12 o'clock with some Puerto Rican girls that's just dying to meet you. We're gonna bring a case of wine, you know. We're gonna mess the food around like we used to. And I sang.
When you think about dance music transcending the cultural backgrounds, when you think of Debbie Harry's biggest record is a disco record. When you think of groups like the Stones, you know, and their biggest records are all dance records.
Blondie was beautiful. She had a hit called Heart of Glass, which was a absolutely disco song.
After I did it, you know, a disco song. After I did Heart of Glass, I mean, people were death to disco. How could you do that? And they were really mad at me. And to this day, don't speak to me. No, just kidding.
Disco. I killed disco. I locked the hubs on my Ford Bronco, went to some place with a shiny ball and it was reflecting. I drove that truck right through there and squashed disco.
The lyrics to most of those songs were either sexual or about what people wanted to do that evening.
I want some hot stuff. Looking for my hot stuff. Gotta have some hot stuff.
It wasn't a genre of music that created great careers. Apart from Donna Summer, it's hard to think of very many disco stars who survived into the 80s. Disco, you think more of acts like the Village People that were just created in the studio.
In the Navy, come on, protect the motherland. In the Navy, come on and join your fellow man. In the Navy, come on people and make a stand. In the Navy, in the Navy, in the Navy.
The campiest act that I liked was the Village People. Matter of fact, the first Village People album I actually think is a great record. It was about a movement, about the whole gay movement, and it was just, you know, it just talked about the places where they hung. Fire Island, San Francisco, Hollywood.
And one of the wonderful things about disco in the late 70s was the acceptance of gay style as mainstream style. The lyrics were transparent gay double entendres, and mainstream white bread America would listen to these songs and say, I like that song, I'll go to the YMCA.
Record companies started realizing very late that most of it was producer-driven and not artist-driven, and were spending millions of dollars developing talent that wasn't really talent.
How far out will record people go to find the perfect setting for the cover of a new album?
Basically what we're shooting is the fulfillment of the role models that these guys play. As you can see, the construction guy has his piece of equipment, the cowboy, the Indian have their horses, and it's the ultimate manifestation of their roles.
The appeal of the group is based on a very simple premise that there's something up there for everybody.
Like kids, when you were growing up, man, how everybody wanted to be a cowboy or in the army. That's sort of what Village People was about.
There were all sorts of goofy disco things, from Disco Duck, Disco Beethoven. There was a Disco Evita soundtrack. I remember Disco Pinocchio.
Disco duck and disco dog and disco this thing and disco that thing.
Disco duck. Disco.
When they attempted to, make it a commodity, do it on an assembly line where they could just churn them out, it's something that would get on your nerve.
When it became so successful, of course, you have so many producers, and not all the producers are really good ones, so a lot of songs became danceable, but not really good songs.
Dancing by the Nile. Disco duck. The ladies love this style. Boss tuck, tuck. Rockin' for a mile. Rockin' tuck, tuck. He ate a crocodile.
At the peak that we had in the 70s, there was radio stations that were actually refusing to play our records on the weekends. You were actually going to have a Bee Gees free weekend. And what makes us angry is this was never afforded any other artist.
There was this Chicago disc jockey who burned all these disco records out in Comiskey Park. And it was the kind of thing, it was a dumb stunt. It was just basically a bad-smelling thing to do in center field, which the White Sox have seen a lot of. But it had the feeling of the turning of the tide.
One thing I felt at the time is that it felt very racist to me, because if a black radio station had gone out and said, man, the Beatles, this and that, so man, Janis Joplin sucks, I don't think that would fly.
There was the association of disco with black people, with gay people, with these despised outgroups. The whole disco sucks slogan is obviously a none too repressed vision of homosexuality.
You had the mixed, multicultural gay influence in the clubs, and then you had the real, middle America, white male rockers on the other end.
Originally, disco was just good groove dance inspiration. But then it started taking on a lot of transparent trendiness with the clothes and the projection on television. It all got too cheap.
The latest innovation by the disco promoters is a new record called A Night at Studio 54. They're trying to cash in on the club's popularity by selling an album of non-stop disco music.
The Studio 54 album will be just as though you're at 54. It'll have the same ambiance. The only thing we'll be missing is Steve selling the records.
Now everybody can get into Studio 54. Jeans.
Pour yourself into a pair of our Lycra stretch jeans, and you're too hot to handle. These stretch jeans take your curves at 90 with the skinniest, sexiest fit around.
After a while, with all of the exploitation of disco music, with the sex and the drugs and the alcohol, people began to say that disco was dying. Disco was not dying. Disco has never died. What happened was that the term disco became associated with all these things, and therefore, like all of these things, was undesirable.
And now following up on the Studio 54 story is Weekend Update correspondent Lorraine Newman outside Studio 54. Lorraine?
Thank you, Bill. In the wee hours last Thursday morning, IRS agents raided this glamorous playground for the elite to confiscate the club's financial records. And in the process, they discovered 2 ounces of cocaine. The scandal has given credence to the rumor that the illicit narcotic known in drug circles as coke, disco dust, and Peruvian marching powder has been commonplace here at Studio 54.
When Ian and Steve Rebell got busted, I think that was the end of it.
Watching discos go out of business, watching the actual dance clubs go out of business and become either tanning salons or punk clubs overnight. That was a very interesting thing to happen.
What happens is, at the end of every decade, the whole business says, well, Everyone from the last decade, step over to the left, and everyone that wants to be big in the new decade, come on in.
There's nothing like great 70s music to get your party in motion. Now you...
People are still dancing, even today, and they will always be dancing.
The backlash made it so you couldn't use the word. I mean, you couldn't say in 1980, I really like disco.
It's the same thing. They call it dance.
There are still people resolutely disco dancing away, but clearly the mood has changed. And a lot of it's to do with the fact that we're very much more aware of the dangers of drugs and sex.
Disco was this vision of perpetual pleasure. You know, the beat would never stop, the dancing would never stop. It'd be an indefatigable sex machine. AIDS killed the idea that you could have endless pleasure and no consequences. What a sad thing, because you look back, people were just enjoying themselves, you know, without worrying.
It was definitely a time where people just didn't seem to care about what was going to happen tomorrow. It was just part of, you know, what was happening at the time. I mean, in retrospect, a lot of those people are not with us today.
Your tender kiss, don't leave me this way.
You know, people talk about it now in terms of the dark shadows of later years, you know, terrible diseases and really dangerous drugs. People forget that a lot of people's lives were very much touched. It's a time when everybody met and mingled in these charmed spaces, and some people's lives were not the same.
So come on, satisfy the need in me.
People have been dancing since Sodom and Gomorrah, and they'll always want to dance. The custom, that human urge doesn't change, to meet people, to couple.
I think the legacy is always going to be just a total crazy era of just hedonism that we're never going to have again. We're never going to be able to capture it again. And so it's going to become this golden age of pleasure.
You understand? I'm at your command. Oh, baby, please, please don't leave me this way. No, baby.
People talk about, yeah, man, the 60s were cool, and people want to recreate Woodstock.
I can't survive.
Maybe next decade they'll be trying to recreate Saturday Night Fever in Studio 54 and Donna Summer and the Village People. I don't know.
Yeah.